Hello, everybody, and welcome to Control F, the NSI Cyber and Tech Centers podcast. This season, we're bringing to you a series of sessions from one of the nation's leading cyber events, the National Cyber Innovation Forum. My name is Andrew McClure, the president of the NCIF, and in this episode, I dive into the welcome remarks and an opening keynote from the acting director of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, Nick Andersen. Stay tuned for a conversation about President Trump's cyber strategy for America and its 6 pillars for shaping adversary behavior, promoting common sense regulation, modernizing and securing federal government networks, securing critical infrastructure, sustaining superiority in critical and emerging technologies, and building the workforce to win. The discussion will examine how the administration is shaping strategy into action to strengthen resilience and preserve America's technological and strategic advantage.
All right. Welcome, everybody. I know we have some folks in the atrium that are going to be making their way in and are already trying to see through to do so. This time I'd like to call Alberto Ypez and Craig Ryan on stage and give a welcoming remarks, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So Craig and Alberto, can you please join me out here?
So, good morning, and thanks everybody for coming out. The Forge Point guys and Andrew have put together a really terrific event. This is, Alberto will tell you, this is our 4th time working together on this with a whole list of great sponsors and a lot of traditional partner companies. But I thought I would give you one just 10-second anecdote on the first meeting I had with Alberto and Forge Point. And it was maybe a dozen, 14 years ago, and we were doing about this much cyber business in public sector. And Alberto came to explain what his VC fund did and how it was just going to be focused on cybersecurity companies and with a special attention to cybersecurity companies that care about supporting the government's mission. And I said, Alberto, but once people buy, 14 years ago, I wasn't the smartest guy, still wasn't. I said, 14 years ago, I said, Alberto, but once everybody buys an antivirus and buys a firewall, the cyber market's going to be done. I don't think they need a VC to go do it. And Alberto said, no, Craig, you know, you're going to have to secure your car, you're going to have to secure the edge, and you're going to have to secure all this stuff. As soon as the bad guys find a way in, as soon as we find a way to block the bad guys, they find another way in. They're not changing their careers. And I think today with the speakers you have and where we are with AI and cyber, I was really wrong and Alberto was probably really right. So with that, thanks everybody for coming, and I'll let Alberto talk.
So good morning and welcome. Forge Point is based in Silicon Valley, and we were having dinner with Craig 5 years ago, and we said, you know, we need to convene a forum where we can bring the innovation community to work with government, to work with established companies, to work with policy, because cybersecurity is embedded in everything we do. And we said, why don't we set up this meeting? The first year we did it in Carousel, in their offices, and you know, we may have had 100 people or so. And we convened entrepreneurs, we convened established companies, many of them with sponsors and so on, and policymakers. So to kind of try to bring together all the different stakeholders, what it takes to adopt new technologies and see how we can enable collaboration. Everybody talks about public-private partnerships. At the end of the day, we need to make it actionable. And you know, 4 years later, thanks to the great work from the organization committee and the NSI for their sponsorship, and now we're here together. We're expecting about 500 people or so to come in. Very key topic. A couple of reflections. Cybersecurity is a team sport, so none of us can do it alone. Wherever we are, we have a role to play, and we need to collaborate. And this is not only national. We were kind of focusing on how we can secure the homeland and everything else, but the reality is a global problem. Cybersecurity will enable economic prosperity if you do it right and protect individuals' right to privacy and our lives are becoming increasingly digital. We're living in unprecedented times. I don't know that any of us know what's going to be here in the next couple of years, but we'll have a role to play. So thank you for taking the time and coming over, and I look forward to listening to the speakers, and I appreciate Andrew, the Microsoft team, and Craig's role being a catalyst that works with many of you has been a tremendous platform for us as a venture capital firm focused on cybersecurity, AI, and infrastructure to try to contribute our role to spark innovation. So thank you very much.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the 2026 National Cyber Innovation Forum. My name is Andrew McClure, and it's my privilege today to welcome you here to the U.S. Capitol for this year's forum. We have a lot of ground to cover today, and an oversold audience too, so we'd ask everybody, if there's seats in the middle, that you move into the center toward the aisles, so folks, as they come in, can also squeeze in. We will not be live streaming the sessions today, however, they will be recorded and released later on as podcast episodes from the National Security Institute, so please stay tuned for that. And now, I would like to thank our distinguished guests, sponsors, host committee, and all of you for joining us here today. The National Cyber Innovation Forum was created to bring together leaders from across tech and government to examine the ideas and innovations that will secure America's digital future. This gathering was grounded on a simple belief that the security and prosperity of the United States will increasingly depend on our ability to innovate faster, fuel technology more effectively, and translate strategic vision into operational capability. Cyber is no longer just a technical discipline or a domain to be protected. It's an essential element of national power that can generate considerable asymmetric advantage, as we've seen glimpses from recent military campaigns. The technologies defining this decade, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, advanced semiconductors, and renewed energy dominance, will transform the global balance of power. And it's cybersecurity which has become the foundational layer that makes technological progress possible and protects the digital systems on which modern society depends. And artificial intelligence is already accelerating decision-making and augmenting both attack and defense. So throughout the day, we're going to hear from leaders from the White House, Congress, the intelligence community, Department of War, Department of Energy, CISA, the FBI, and some of the most innovative companies in the industry. So together, they'll explore some of the most pressing questions facing the country today. How do we preserve America's technological edge? How do we strengthen resilience of our critical infrastructure, secure our supply chain, and protect our data? How do we harness the power of artificial intelligence while mitigating emerging risks to national security? How do we use technology to combat fraud that erodes public trust and diverts taxpayer resources? And how do we build enduring partnerships between those in government, entrepreneurs, investors, and industry leaders like you all that are essential to economic and national security? A recurring theme throughout the day is that innovation alone is not enough. The United States has never lacked for innovative ideas. Our strategic advantage has always come from our ability to deploy those ideas faster than anyone. That requires sound policy and well-functioning markets. It requires a world-class workforce and informed capital allocation. And it requires an entrepreneurial ecosystem capable of transforming bold ideas into mission-ready capabilities. And that's why we're assembled here today. Great companies are founded by great people. The story of innovation is found in biographies and not in technical manuals. So as we approach our nation's 250th anniversary, we are called to ensure that the United States remains the world's leading technology and cyber power. So the challenge before us is clear: to preserve our technological edge, strengthen collective defense, and secure the data and systems that underpin our economy, our military, and our way of life. Thank you for being part of this important effort. Thank you for your leadership and service to this mission. And thank you for helping secure and build the future. And with that, I'd like to welcome to the stage Acting Assistant Director Nick Andersen.
Well, great. Thank you, Nick, again for joining us today. Some of you looking in your program may realize that this is not Director Cairncross. The director had to be elsewhere today, so Mr. Andersen, really appreciate you stepping in his place. But let's go ahead and get started.
Yeah, sounds great. CISA is just the better looking, more suave, debonair cousin of ONCD, so we're happy to fill in for him.
Excellent. Well, as many folks in this room know, the President released the cyber strategy for securing America in March. And what we want to talk about today, and many of the themes that we'll discuss throughout the course of our industry and government panels, touch on many facets in the strategy: shaping adversary behavior, promoting common sense regulations, modernizing and securing the federal workforce and government, securing critical infrastructure, and sustaining superiority in critical and emerging technologies. So, Director Andersen, can you please walk us through some insights on how CISA is approaching the implementation of the cyber strategy?
Yeah, well, the great thing about being the nation's cyber defense agency is that when a national level cyber strategy comes out, it looks an awful lot like your work plan. So I think when you look at all the elements that you just mentioned across the different pillar areas there, from approaches to common sense regulation, securing federal networks, working to secure critical infrastructure, our critical emerging technologies work, or our workforce itself, all of those elements directly align to different initiatives that we see within the CISA family. Whether it's internal agency initiatives or external initiatives that we're engaging with you all. And when we start to look at all the different emerging areas, of course, AI has been the only thing that DC has wanted to talk about for the last month and a half, and that is critically important, much of our way forward. But we're spending a lot of time focusing on the key technology and infrastructure that underpins American life as well. And not only how do we modernize and how we secure that, but how do we take these new and adaptive technologies and bring it into the fold when we start to look at defensive operations. So for us, CISA is laser focused on what is that core mission for why is it that CISA exists, and it's to honor the special trust that the American public has in us to be able to secure its most critical infrastructure, whether those are government systems that they rely upon, or it's making sure that we've got lights and running water, and that we've got a degree of security and trust that people can rely upon. At the end of the day, what we're doing is we're not just securing the delivery of essential services. We're delivering for the inherent psychological safety that comes from being in a country like ours and people needing to rely on these things to be able to make life decisions, to be able to make business decisions day in, day out. And this is really what I think drives us on the CISA front when we're looking at the national cyber strategy, is looking at the type of leadership that President Trump has charged his administration with pushing forward on delivering what's most important to the American people where it matters most.
Well, let's jump into that a little bit more, because in the strategy, there's a big component around also enabling and securing the innovation economy, right? And there's a big part that the private sector plays as part of that. One of the key themes we're going to see throughout the day also touches on AI and how AI might both affect cyber defenders, but then also how we might use that within our own networks to find adversaries. So there's a few threads to pull out of there, but given the consistent rapid emergence of new technology and sophisticated threats, what is the administration doing to help secure innovation while simultaneously promoting
the AI technologies that we're seeing drive just incredible growth.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we start talking about the AI story, and again, I know that it has been all-consuming for people that are at sort of the intersection of emerging technology and innovation and cybersecurity in particular for the last couple of months. It really is first and foremost just a fantastic story about the benefits of American innovation and American leadership and the investment that the business community has made in setting the conditions that are allowing us for allowing for that first mover advantage for the United States as we begin to move into this space. There's fantastic opportunities here. There's risk as well. I think everybody recognizes we are going to have adversaries that are going to possess similar capabilities and are absolutely going to attempt to weaponize them against our critical infrastructure, against our government networks, against our businesses, to attempt to extract concessions and attempts to advance their own geopolitical objectives. But there's a fantastic opportunity here for us to partner so closely with the innovation ecosystem to be able to better secure America's infrastructure for the long term. We've got a tremendous amount of tech debt. I think whether you look at the private sector or you look at our governments and public sector networks and systems that we're supporting, there's just a tremendous amount of technical debt that's out there. We've not made the right level of investment required in order to be able to readily secure ourselves, for the future. We've put a lot of these things off. We've made different risk decisions for a variety of reasons. But when we start talking about having to put out cybersecurity advisories because of nation-state threat actors in recent history, talking about targeting of PLCs and operational technology environments, the biggest risk element that's associated here are devices like these that are open and accessible on the internet, and devices that aren't appropriately secure that are sitting on that internet edge. Those are just terrible, terrible risk decisions first and foremost that are being made, and we have to address some of those core fundamental elements as we move forward. We're really hoping that as we start to see the promise of AI and the innovation ecosystem move forward delivery, we have to be able to keep first and foremost in our minds practices like secure by design and secure by default, and how we're hoping to be able to use the technology investments in order to be able to collectively advance things for the whole.
Yeah, I want to pick up on this idea of tech debt, right? One of the missions of CISA is to help secure federal government systems. And with tech debt, something that many private companies also experience. Confront that in a number of ways. Automation is one, and so there's a key enabling story for AI in that. But AI is also generating and has potential to generate faster discovery of new vulnerabilities, and that might only accelerate the pace of the debt that accumulates across many organizations. So can you help us appreciate the full scale of what the rapid pace of vulnerability creation might do, and of course CISA's own role in managing the vulnerability databases?
Yeah, I think one of the most shared things in my own texts and chats and everything over the course of the last month or so has been this old goofy XKCD cartoon of the entire world, this tech ecosystem that is built up and stacked up on top of this one little teeny tiny block down at the bottom that represents the open source community. And it's like, this is, I can't remember the specific reference, like this is Dave, and Dave's been maintaining this thing in his garage in Michigan for the last 30 years, and just nobody's appreciated poor Dave and his burden that he's going to take on as we begin to see rapid vulnerability escalation. So I think that the open source community is one that I'm particularly worried about when we start to think about sort of the rapid escalation of vulnerability discovery. But it is going to result in us having to make some really hard decisions on the level of investment that's going to be required. I think there's a tremendous opportunity here to sort of re-architect areas where we know they've been lacking, to make investments in areas where we know they've been lacking, and to just force some hard security decisions to be made in a way where people thought that their risk profile was different than what it is. And when we see the escalation in terms of speed, scale, and velocity of vulnerability discovery to weaponization and exploitation, I mean that's something that again a month and a half ago when everybody around here started talking about this is something we were already talking about with a lot of our stakeholders, in the CISA team, and with the wider industry ecosystem. was exactly what is it that we're going to try to be able to do to be able to modify our approach to vulnerability management, modify our approach to coordinated vulnerability disclosure, modify our approach to remediation, with the explicit understanding that we're just not going to be able to keep up using traditional mechanisms with the load that we're going to see for vulnerability discovery moving forward.
Well, it sounds like there's a call to action too for those who might be in industry in this room. And that's another core element of the national cyber strategy is driving some of this. So can you speak to some of the partnerships that you're building to help confront bringing either new capabilities, technologies to government to help address the increasing pace of not only vulnerability disclosure and discovery, but also network security, whether it's through identity or the physical layer as well?
Yeah, for sure. So we're looking at developing the right, even just contractual relationships, so we can make sure that we have the right relationships with companies that are going to be able to engage in a very substantive way with both critical infrastructure owner operators and with federal system operators. I don't necessarily want individual agencies, departments trying to think about how they're going to solve this problem on their own, or an owner operator thinking about how they're going to try to solve this problem on their own. So we're looking at what are the right sort of transactional relationships that we can establish to help make that as easy and as seamless as possible for people as they begin to move forward. Additionally, when we start to look at some of our partnership elements, we're deliberately working right now to prioritize critical infrastructure owner-operator entities that we can get to first. Again, this is all months ago that we started kicking all this stuff off. So this is not a direct response to anything we've been talking about recently. To develop an intergovernmental approach to a homeland defense working group to look at a good blue space view of what is it that's most significantly important to us. When we start to look at public health and safety, national security, defense, critical infrastructure, and continuity of the economy, then take a good red space view of looking back at our intelligence holdings for the last several years and saying, this is our view of what we think is important, here's what the adversary thinks is important. Where are we actually seeing them repositioned, where are we seeing their activity, where are we seeing them landing on the infrastructure that they believe is going to be most significant for achieving their objectives. Then looking at that overlap and saying, now how are we going to engage with joint action plans with those companies directly? And some of those are technology companies, some of those are critical infrastructure owner operators. Do we be able to achieve a higher minimum level of resilience overall? And again, not with the expectation that nobody's going to be impacted. Everybody in the world has cyber incidents. Everybody in the world has a vulnerability that's exploited. And being able to look at ease of recoverability and ease of normalized resilience metrics that are going to be able to get us there, that's really where we have to invest our time moving forward. So I think whether it's our partnerships that we have with entities like JCDC, and I know Clayton's come up here to talk to you all a little bit later, the partnerships that we have there that we've built up over a number of years, or the traditional partnerships that we have within the CVE ecosystem with vulnerability management, or just the general secure by design practices we continue to push forward, and the things we want to be able to push forward to help support industry as they lead in getting things that are going to be more easily consumable for the larger workforce, like getting to machine-readable SBOMs and making that a more ubiquitous reality.
Well, speaking of securing critical infrastructure, we were talking behind stage about your trip down to Fort Bragg last week as well. Do you want to touch a little bit upon the Defense Critical Infrastructure Initiative, what that entails, and why that's also an example of good cross-government coordination?
Yeah, and I think the great thing about the DCI conversation there, so we went down last week with Secretary of the Army, many of the senior leaders on his staff, as well as the chairman of the FCC, a lot of great local leaders that were down in North Carolina to be able to talk about just the impacts of defense critical infrastructure. I think the fantastic thing is this is really a microcosm of the larger critical infrastructure resilience conversation. And defense critical infrastructure is also the same infrastructure that's used by local communities. So when we start talking about what are our powers supporting Fort Bragg, we're also talking about what are our powers supporting the local communities. Whether that's where military members are living, or the businesses that are supporting them, or the infrastructure that's making the base operate. At the end of the day, we're trying to get to what is it that really matters and how do we set good resilience targets. So where I think we have failed in the past with initiatives of how we took on things like Section 9 designations for companies that we thought were critically important was we've taken an entity level view. we would just say, you company X, you are very important. Here's your letter saying that you're very important, best of luck. Maybe we've got some opportunities to collaborate with you more into the future. What we're trying to get to now is saying there's a specific function that is critically important. In this case, for defense critical infrastructure, there's a specific function that needs to be delivered. How can we set real resilience targets associated with that? Otherwise, if I'm an energy sector company, it is impossible for me to be able to deliver to an appropriate resilience target if somebody doesn't tell me I need 80% of my normal base load because I'm in a time of crisis and I need to be able to get ready for troop deployments, or I need 20%, or I need 120%. I really have to scale up my operations here on the base to be able to support that. So being able to start with being able to set clear targets for what does resilience even mean for these entities, and then ultimately talking about how do we invest appropriately alongside them. Whether that's time, whether that's dollars, whether it is a fresh approach to how we're looking at Homeland Security grant programs, whatever it is, and really looking as an interagency team at where we make the most impact to be able to achieve a higher level of resilience for defense critical infrastructure in particular. And again, it's a microcosm of where we start to look at really these geographic nodes that start to become very important, because we have to be able to look at the interconnectivity of energy, of telecommunications, of water, and so forth and so on, and the cascading effects that we see with the interconnectedness with our critical infrastructure community. It provides for a good opportunity to continue to build that partnership that we've got with the Department of War and with the senior leaders that are so heavily invested in the success.
Great. Well, critical infrastructure and the DCI initiative, I think, shows the public-to-public collaboration, of course, working with state and local governments around essential services. What about essential services that the technology community might use? And I'm thinking now of open source code. Is there a role for CISA to either work with Department of War or other agencies, as well as you think about maybe it's the purchasing power, or you think about what open source code the rest of the technology community is really sourcing, given the scale of vulnerabilities that we're also seeing manifest now in different code commits?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I think the ability to be able to partner at scale and to be able to, again, where we can have unified efforts between the public sector and the private sector is going to be just critically important. And I think it's both important for being able to have a good quality understanding of what is the real threat and risk landscape, what is the problem that we're even trying to solve for in this area, and then actually how do we apply resources in a coordinated way. Because I don't think either one can do it, without the other. Internal and federal government side, we're trying to make sure we get a good understanding of what is the total landscape for us in terms of open source software use, across federal government. There's a lot of programs there. I feel like it's a blast back to 1990 to even be talking about shadow IT, but it really is the core concepts that we're talking about here, just a blast the past of shadow and gray IT, and what we're going to do from a business continuity and disaster recovery perspective, which just aren't terms that are cool enough to use anymore. But being able to work collaboratively as we look at the wider supply chain ecosystem is going to be really, really important for us moving forward. And being able to achieve that core level of visibility, and then again, orchestration of action, to be able to identify what's most important and where we're going to put our dollars very quickly in order to be able to secure these resources moving forward. It's going to be a tremendous challenge, but I think there's a real opportunity for us to show why people look to the United States and why they look to us and our partnership that we have across government and the innovation ecosystem as a force for good.
Yeah, great. I want to think about the CISA role as also being the nation's incident response team, right? Not only setting the tabletop exercises, emergency preparedness for critical infrastructure, but how might you think about, in the event of, call it, systemic cyber scenarios, supporting the industry? Is there a role to work with different industry players through major breaches that we might see come down the road?
Yeah, I think a lot of that's going to be building off the work and the relationships that we built up over a number of years. I mean, so to your point, CISA functions in both worlds as the nation's cyber defense agency and the national coordinator for critical infrastructure security and resilience. Being able to bring together those two different perspectives is really important. Being able to align those perspectives becomes very difficult between a critical infrastructure perspective and just sort of what I would say more generic cyber incident response, what we're doing on an operational basis. But we started to look at like our preparedness and resilience groups and how we focus specifically around some nation-state threat actor scenarios and how we work to build up those playbooks with industry today. That's work that I think we're going to continue to scale out and continue to grow in a very significant way. I think that not just the moment demands it, but I think our longer-term mission for again, why does this even exist, demands it. We get to have the focused opportunity to be able to identify what are our most significant challenges in this area, how do we collaborate with industry to identify the most significant challenges in the area, and then how can we use our opportunity to convene those people in a space where they can openly collaborate in a significant way with their government partners to be able to develop those just common sense playbooks on what are we going to do during a bad day. What none of us want to think about is having to be able to really account to our families or understanding that we know what the worst is that can happen. We look at the types of like incidents that we've had over just the last couple of months, whether it was the Verizon outage recently, or we saw a Cloudflare outage recently. We've been very open with those partners. Cloudflare in particular was very open in offering to us that they were going to come in and share with us exactly what happened. They were very open, communicative during their outage while it was occurring, and then they were willing to come in and talk about a playbook for the future on how they thought people could learn from their best practices from engaging in sort of that incident. And that was just related to an outage. Building on those playbooks for the future as we start to look at no-kidding, maliciously derived incidents is going to be very important to the work this is going to be taken on over the long term.
Well, let's pick up on that thread because part of the conversation is working with industry. And we talked about the President's cyber strategy and CISA's role in implementing a good portion of that. But what would you say to many of the folks in the private sector here? What would you like to see, or what would be the call to action for a lot of the businesses that might be represented here, and what's the best way to work with CISA?
I think it's probably a two-part answer there. It's when we start to look at, again, we talked a little bit about the larger tech debt problem. We have to collaborate together as government and industry in order to be able to solve that challenge over the long term. And that means we can no longer take approaches where we're strapping security on at the end, or we're hoping that unique security-focused products, while fantastic, will continue to be the panacea for all things that ail us regarding security decisions. We have to be very deliberate about the types of trade-off decisions that we're making within this technical space. A lot of this is going to harken back again to how are we going to provide the right levels of visibility to people in a machine-readable way so we have a good understanding of what goes into building the technology that we're consuming. And also, how are we going to take design principles up front that are going to lead us in a responsible way to understanding security at the beginning. So that's part one. I think part two on the how do we respond, how do we work together more collaboratively. Again, we've got lots of different partnership opportunities. I think my desire would be for CISA to be your default. If you don't know where else to go in government, just come to CISA. That's fine. We will help plug you in with the right entity, whether it's because you have a fantastic technical product that you're trying to find a conversation to have with somebody to say, I think I'm solving for this problem. Am I on the right track? Well, great. We can probably link you up with somebody between all of our government partnerships to see, is this something we can get you some feedback on? Is there a conversation to be had there? If it's an operational, coordination issue, great, come to us. We've got all these fantastic partnerships. I'm investing a lot of my time every single day talking to all of our government partners, our industry partners, on developing these strong partnerships for the future, whether it's with us, NSA, Cyber Command, FBI, our sector risk management agencies, or the industry partners that we see. And we can help to bring those conversations together. Or if you think there's a critical conversation that isn't happening at all, we can use our JCDC team, and feel free to allow questions that Clayton to in just a few minutes, about how we can identify those problem statements and bring together groups that are dedicated to being able to solve for those challenges, even if it's something that we're not addressing today.
Well, Director Andersen, appreciate your time joining us today. So please join me in thanking Nick for being up here on stage.
That's a wrap for today's episode. Thanks to Hannah Haynes, Keelan Wolf, Claude Jennings, and the entire NSI CTC team in helping us produce today's episode. Be on the lookout every Monday and Wednesday for more sessions from the National Cyber Innovation Forum. If you like what you heard, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe. Thanks again.